In 30 years of covering professional baseball, there are moments that veterans of this sport thought they had seen everything. Moments that stretched the boundaries of what seemed possible inside the white chalk lines of a major league diamond. Moments of triumph so extraordinary they defied belief. Moments of controversy so explosive they rewrote the rulebook of what professional baseball could become. And then there are moments that have no precedent. No historical comparison. No framework that adequately explains what just happened or why. Moments so unusual, so jarring, so completely outside the boundaries of anything the sport has experienced before, that the only honest response is to stop, stare, and admit that baseball, after more than a century of existence, can still produce something nobody has ever seen. What happened at Dodger Stadium following Shohei Ohtani's 23rd home run of the season was one of those moments. Because it was not the home run itself that stopped the world. Ohtani hits home runs the way other players breathe, naturally, inevitably, with a casual magnificence that makes the impossible look routine. Number 23 cleared the left field wall with the kind of effortless authority that has become his signature. The crowd rose as one. The roar was deafening. Another moment of Ohtani greatness filed away into the endless archive of Ohtani greatness. But what happened next, what the umpires did in the seconds that followed, ignited a firestorm that would consume professional baseball for days. And when the MLB finally announced its investigation results, the verdict sent shockwaves through every corner of the sport that nobody saw coming. To understand what occurred, you first need to understand the atmosphere that had been building inside Dodger Stadium throughout that game. Tension had been escalating between the Dodgers and their opponents from the opening pitch, the kind of slow-burning competitive fury that veteran players recognize immediately and that younger players are never quite prepared for until they find themselves inside it. Words had been exchanged between dugouts in the early innings. A pitch had sailed uncomfortably close to a Dodgers hitter in the fourth. Gestures had been made. Glances had been held a beat too long. The umpiring crew had already issued 2 warnings before the 6th inning, a signal to everyone on that field that the crew behind the plate understood perfectly well what kind of game this was becoming. When Ohtani stepped to the plate in the 7th inning, the stadium felt like a room where someone had slowly been turning up the temperature for hours. Everyone inside it was aware of the heat. Nobody was talking about it. And nobody, not a single person in that building, was prepared for what was about to happen. The pitch was a fastball, elevated and over the inner half of the plate. Ohtani recognized it in the first fraction of a second, the way only the greatest hitters in the history of the sport can recognize a pitch before it has fully left the pitcher's hand. His swing was compact, violent, and perfectly timed. The contact was the kind that needs no announcement. The sound alone told 40,000 people simultaneously that this baseball was not coming back. 23rd home run of the season. The crowd erupted. Ohtani rounded the bases with that familiar, measured pace, never showboating, never slowing, the embodiment of professional excellence even in moments of personal triumph. He touched home plate. His teammates met him at the dugout steps. The celebration was warm but brief, because that is the Dodgers' way, and that is Ohtani's way. And then the home plate umpire signaled for the bat. What happened in the next 90 seconds remains, even now, one of the most discussed and debated sequences in recent baseball history. The umpire, a veteran official with more than 2 decades of major league experience, approached the Dodgers dugout and requested Ohtani's bat for inspection. This in itself is not unusual. Bat checks occur throughout the season, and players are accustomed to the routine nature of the process. But what this umpire did next was not routine. In the process of inspecting the bat, the same bat Ohtani had just used to launch his 23rd home run of the season over the left field wall, something went wrong. Catastrophically, visibly, undeniably wrong. The bat, one of Ohtani's personal models that he had used throughout a significant portion of the season, came apart in the umpire's hands. The crack of it, not the sharp crack of a baseball making contact, but the splintering, breaking sound of something being destroyed, cut through the noise of the stadium like a blade. Players in both dugouts heard it. Coaches froze. And for one long, disbelieving moment, nobody moved. Then Mookie Betts moved. Betts was out of the dugout before the pieces of the bat had finished falling. His voice, normally the measured, certain voice of a champion and a leader, carried a raw edge that his teammates had almost never heard before. He was not shouting. Mookie Betts almost never shouts. But the words he directed at the umpiring crew were clear enough to be heard by everyone within 30 feet, and clear enough that 3 separate television microphones captured fragments of what he said. The core of it was simple. Undeniable. And it lit the fuse on everything that followed. You broke his bat. You broke his bat on purpose. Within seconds, both dugouts were emptying. Manager Dave Roberts was on the field with a speed that belied his years, placing himself directly between his players and the umpiring crew with the controlled urgency of a man trying to prevent something irreversible from occurring. The opposing manager emerged from his dugout as well, though his players' involvement in what followed would become one of the central questions of the MLB investigation. What erupted over the next several minutes was described by witnesses as one of the most chaotic scenes Dodger Stadium has hosted in the modern era. Not a traditional brawl born from a hit batter or a crossed word between players, something different. Something more disorienting. Because the fury was directed not at an opposing player but at the men in blue who are supposed to stand above the conflict entirely. The men whose authority over the field of play is absolute and unquestioned. Until tonight, it had been unquestioned. Ohtani himself stood at the edge of the dugout throughout the incident. He did not charge onto the field. He did not direct his teammates. He stood with his arms at his sides and watched the pieces of his bat lying in the dirt near home plate with an expression that revealed absolutely nothing about what he was thinking or feeling in that moment. Those who know Ohtani well say that this particular silence, this particular stillness, is the most serious version of Shohei Ohtani. Not the smiling Ohtani. Not the focused, locked-in Ohtani of a crucial at-bat. This was the Ohtani who had gone somewhere deep inside himself and closed the door. 3 ejections were issued before order was restored. 2 Dodgers players and 1 member of the coaching staff were removed from the game. Roberts argued with extraordinary persistence before finally accepting the crew chief's final word and returning to the dugout. As he passed Ohtani on the steps, he placed one hand briefly on his star player's shoulder. He said something quietly that nobody else heard. Ohtani nodded once. Then he went back inside. The MLB investigation was announced within hours of the final out. The league confirmed that it had reviewed footage from all available camera angles, had collected statements from players and coaches on both sides, and had conducted formal interviews with all 4 members of the umpiring crew. The process, the league stated, would be thorough, independent, and without predetermined conclusions. Baseball held its breath for 4 days. When the results were announced, the reaction across the sport was immediate and divided. The league found that the bat's structural integrity had been compromised prior to the incident, meaning the bat was already weakened before the umpire's inspection. The investigation concluded that the umpire did not deliberately destroy Ohtani's bat, but that the handling during inspection had been performed with insufficient care given the bat's condition. The disciplinary consequences were significant. The home plate umpire received a formal suspension, the length of which was disclosed only to the parties involved, though sources familiar with the decision confirmed it was the longest umpire suspension issued in more than a decade. Additional procedural changes to mid-game equipment inspections were announced immediately, with new protocols to take effect across all 30 organizations without delay. For the players ejected during the incident, suspensions ranging from 2 to 5 games were confirmed. The coaching staff member received a 3-game suspension and an undisclosed fine. In the Dodgers clubhouse, the announcement was received in near silence. Will Smith sat at his locker and read the league's statement twice before setting his phone down and staring at the floor for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. I respect the process. I respect the league's decision. But I want to be clear, what we felt that night, what we saw happen to Shohei's bat, that was real. The anger we felt was real. And no investigation changes what it felt like to stand there and watch that happen. Freddie Freeman, who had been among the first to emerge from the dugout that night, offered a response that was characteristically measured and complete. The league did its job. We trust that. What matters now is that changes are being made so this doesn't happen again. That's what Shohei deserves. That's what every player in this league deserves. Ohtani addressed the media for the first time since the incident 2 days after the investigation results were released. He sat at the press conference table with perfect posture and that familiar, unreadable composure. He thanked the league for the thoroughness of its investigation. He expressed confidence in the new protocols. He said all the right things in all the right ways. And then, as the press conference ended and he rose to leave, a reporter called out one final question. "Shohei, how did you feel watching your bat break?" Ohtani paused at the door. He turned, just slightly. And for one brief moment, something passed across his face that was not composure, not calm, not the professional mask he wears so flawlessly in public. It was there for less than a second. Then it was gone. He smiled quietly, said nothing, and walked out the door. But everyone in that room had seen it. And everyone in that room understood. Shohei Ohtani had felt every single moment of that night. Every piece of it. The sound of the bat breaking. The silence of the stadium. The fury of his teammates. The long days of waiting for answers that felt adequate to the weight of what had occurred. He had felt all of it. He simply refused to let the world see it until he was ready. And now, with the investigation closed and the consequences delivered, Shohei Ohtani was ready for exactly one thing. Getting back in the batter's box. Picking up a new bat. And hitting number 24.